Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 272 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to get the steel alloy set up, including the new one, cobalt steel. Enjoy. And it's pounding through all of that old concrete, which is what I'd want to see. But since we have a bunch of this, we might as well keep the concrete line going. And it doesn't go everywhere, because it can only hit areas that are covered by the bot network, but that's good enough. I'll just keep paving back and forth and make sure not to cover anything. I think the only buses we have to worry about are above this point, so we can just keep using our factory lagging little concrete placer here. And let's have a little bit of overlap here so nothing bad happens. Just lag the computer. It's fine, it's got this. Okay, take a breather. And try again. I wonder why it lags specifically over time like that. It's like it needs a period of time for the network to catch up with all of the concrete you're trying to place. Then let's do one more line here. I guess just slow down every once in a while here. Give the computer a break. It's like it has to do some kind of processing with the robots. Like after you place a blueprint or a bunch of blueprints, it like takes a couple of seconds for it to go through the process of actually assigning those jobs. But there we go. Not much to see on the map view, but we've got lots of concrete to be placed now, and bots are probably coming from all over the place to do this, and I don't know exactly how smart this is considering we need to build more stuff here, but I did want to get this built ahead of time, specifically so that we could start the placement of concrete, because it does take a long time. And if we don't use up that stone, it's just going to be turned into more ore, which is a fine use of it, but I'd rather get all this concrete taken care of first since it's such a huge dump of stone. And that's a lot of places for robots to park if they need to, but it takes robots a long time to place concrete, unfortunately. So you just gotta wait it out. And it looks like our steam engines here are working okay. They are permanently connected, which is a little triggering to me. I'd want them to be taken off the network. But the work of setting each one of these onto their own little network that turns on and off based on the existence of steam or the lack thereof sounds like way more work than I want to put into this. And the amount of available power is going to be less relevant when we have nuclear power, so having perfectly accurate power charts is less important. But our evolution's going down again. I guess wait till about 30 and then turn it off and maybe wait till it goes to 50 again. We do want to kind of hold on to these orbs, so I don't necessarily want to burn all of them because we do actually need them for research. Oh man, look at that. Robots are getting to work. Well, looking good. As long as we're not the ones placing them down, I think we're fine. And I noticed here that the steel supply depot is empty, which means that all of this production is going to end soon, whenever this steel runs out. It's not using it very fast, but it is using it. So to keep the concrete flowing, we should probably get that taken care of. So instead of going to the left first, let's go to the right. And be careful where we drive on the bus, because it's not exactly driving safe with these sorting warehouses in here. But the next thing we had to do was take care of the Invar. And it looks like I made a note from forever ago. Sized for 60 a second based on nickel output. Needed for science. Supply is only 30. Need steel for manganese and silicon for full power. That makes sense. So basically, I think what I was saying there is that this was a little undersized based on its input, but that shouldn't matter. That when we rebuild it, it will be correct. So our goal is making the plates. There is no coil form. And from that, we need molten Invar. And there's only one way. Steel and nickel. Let's just make a new line here. We might be able to use that old one. But if our goal is Invar plates, we'll take it down the line and make sure all these machines are the correct tiers. Because we're basically limited on our input of steel. And the question is how much steel are we going to end up having? Well, the worst case scenario is these 4 belts of iron going in, and it's a 4-to-1 ratio of getting steel to come out. So the worst case scenario is that we would only have 1 belt of steel coming out. And I think I was slightly mixed up when I did that math before with that sign, because there's only one way of making steel ingots, and that's with making iron. It's if you want the steel coils that has these other methods. So as far as making Invar, we only have one way to do it. It has to be from steel ingots, and those steel ingots have to come from iron ingots. So the best case scenario we will ever have is 1 belt because of the size of this. And I'm wondering, what did we size this for? So 1080 of output, and it looks like that would have created about 90, but that 1080 was totally not possible because of this steel requirement here. So we built this so big, having 8 belts, specifically so 4 of them could be dedicated to steel, because what it was before is we only had a total of 4, so whenever steel was running or iron was running, the other would get nothing. So now by having 4 full belts, it will always be able to run, but unfortunately the actual speed of the setup won't increase very much. But I don't know if we've ever really been short on steel as a function of our output speed, more than a function of the input resources just only being able to go to so many places. So let's switch this to input. We know the maximum we're going to have is 30, which means our maximum output of Invar is just 45 compared to, well, the 90 we were hoping to get here. I wonder how much our biggest use of it is, which I think is this science setup right here. Well, it's set to use 45, so I guess that's good in that sense, that we can still keep up with it. But now the question is, do we want to expand our iron production to make it so we can make even more Invar than that? Guess it depends. What do all of these Invar plates actually go into? And they go into a reasonable amount of things, but are any of them super important? So it's mainly a military thing. So roboports, burner heat sources, wagons, locomotives, these are all things we don't produce very fast. Heat pipes, storage tanks, sniper turrets, all the turrets basically. Equipment, boiler 3, and the science. So actually, as it turns out, we don't really need it for that many things. For all this other stuff, it will be used in rather small quantities, because it's not like we're using that many electric mining drills at any given time. But the thing it definitely goes into is the military research. By not expanding our steel, it does mean we are going to be limited on our ability to do military research. Essentially, it will be limited to as fast as it is now. It won't be any faster. So here's another interesting question. What exactly does steel go into? Well, quite a bit more. It's definitely a big thing in the factory here. Can't even go through that list. It's too many things. So the question is, do we want to double our output of steel in order to double the output of Invar, so we can do twice as much military research as we're doing now, at the expense that when that is running at full speed, we will have 0 steel for the rest of the factory, which means we will have nothing for all of this? Seems unwise. The whole point of doubling the output of iron was so that half of that output would not be monopolized by steel. So I might slightly regret not expanding that for military packs, but also, luckily, military research is just not that big of a part of the tree. And one thing I've noted, just kind of looking at this, so below here, the green stuff we've researched, above here, the red we have not. Look at where the dividing line is. We've actually researched more than half of the technologies now. Imagine that. Does this mean we're getting closer to the end of the game? Now that all of this has been researched, and it's just this which remains. In fact, it's really not that deep. So that's pretty cool to see. But I don't know how much more military research we're actually going to be doing, and if it's that important that it happens as fast as it physically can. So yeah, that's an interesting concept, but we could always use productivity modules. We only added those in after the fact, so we're not even close to the amount of productivity modules we can put in here if we wanted to really ramp it up. So with that, I'm thinking we will just stick with what we've built here. And how is the concrete happening? Well, the robots are staying busy. It's kind of funny how they place them in chunks like that. Actually, it kind of looks like a limiting factor is just this this storage chest here, because it can only throw them so fast. So knowing that, let's essentially clear all this out. Because I do want to come down here and possibly increase the output of this. Just to make sure it's keeping up with things. As long as that level is going down, then they are. So I think we're keeping up. Is there any limiting factors on production here? We're not making any regular concrete yet because we are consuming all of the extras that we had. Plus, whenever we place refined concrete, robots are bringing back regular concrete to be converted. So we need to go through the rest of that warehouse first. And we have one full red belt here, and they're basically going through it, so it seems like it's running as fast as it can there. The robots have diverted from their task of laying concrete to help us out with removing all of this. Alright, well, we need to add in the speed modules, which will greatly reduce the size of this. All the way down to less than one machine for the induction furnace. Well, I kind of want to move this stuff up in order to make it in line with here, but it also doesn't really need to be moved up at all. At least with this part, because this won't have any of the cooling towers to deal with. It will only be the regular steel process that will. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen to this road. We'll eventually move it somewhere. And we only need one induction furnace, and it won't have any logic attached to it. So I don't really need to worry about anything there. We just need to figure out what kind of build we want to do for these casting machines. So we need a total of 8 machines. So let's put them on each side. The invar goes in, and it will come out. We're having 2 belts worth. Each individual machine will pump out 6 of them. So we'll flip that to the other side. Put them through a balancer because why not? And then we'll get our 2 outputs. Let's see, is this road actually going to continue through here? Or go somewhere else? Not sure. Might actually make more sense for it to come down here because technically the ore bus is up here. So knowing that, I kind of want to extend these lines out. And actually, because of its size, it might fit in here rather well. We're only going to need 1 induction furnace here. And it would go somewhere, making our one recipe of Invar. And it will have a pretty significant input here. 36, which is about 4 inputs of the steel. And then, since we only have one machine, I guess we can just have the other 2 inputs be on the other side. And then it has the pipe going out, and that's it. And since I don't think this is ever going to be expanded in size, we can just sort of place them close together here. And actually, potentially, make it a little straighter. And then, is that lined up with this right here? Oh, it actually is. Is that a decent spot to put it? Probably. I don't think we necessarily need to mash everything, plus this means that the belts can just kind of go straight. Is that an okay spot for the train station? Yeah, probably. It's not exactly straight with this, but when we build one of these, we'll have to space it out there. But I think it would work fine. Although this might look slightly straighter if both of these belts just went straight up and then in. So there we go. Still waiting on everything to get here, but not much to really worry about. So we need our one belt of steel, which is right here. And I guess the other question is, do the steel ingots go into other alloys? No, not really. They either go into steel themselves, or basically the steel type alloys of Invar or the cobalt steel. And cobalt steel does not come in a coil form either, and that's actually a new resource we need to make, which would probably be right next door to this. So it would be another small setup. So we probably do want to at least take a spot on the bus. We don't know which one it might want, but we can claim this top one here, just to pick one of them. So that'll be where the steel goes. And then we have 3 belts of Invar that we totally aren't going to be consuming for this one thing, but since we've got them, we'll do it. Signals down so we can see them, but I don't know if we've done this before. Where we have a major train line going straight over a bus, but that's what we got going here. Okay, the needed Invar would come in on this side, and this is probably the last use of it. Uh-oh, we gotta make this a sorting one. Don't want to fill up. There we go. Then we have our iron. It's got 2 belts of it, but I think it's just built that way because that's just how we set this up. That it only has 4 belts going in, which means it'll ever only have 1 belt going out. So we don't want it to line up with this belt. So let's just take this one right here. It would come up here. We'd need a splitter because some of it would go this way. Probably don't need to be too careful with the positions of the undergrounds there. But I don't know, it would be slightly cleaner. Like this, it just looks weird without the other belts in there. But when the belts are there, it would be cleaner. So we've got a bunch of extra steel in here because of just robots moving things around. But that won't be the case for long. But, and that's already filled up too, so nothing much is going to happen when we hook this up. But it's certainly a lot smaller than it used to be. And this will be 45 a second, so it definitely won't be maxing out these belts. But it should be maxing out the belt of steel. And it totally is. So that is our entire factory's output of steel right there. Okay. Well, it's time to do something new. We need to do our cobalt steel. And it's probably important to make sure that these cobalt ingots don't go into anything else I'm not thinking of. So if we wanted to waste it on titanium, we would send it there. Or on iron or steel. So we'll probably have the logic set up for that. And then cobalt powder. But that's just to making cobalt paste, which itself is a way to generate alien artifacts without actually having to shoot said aliens. So this is basically the one use of it. And funnily enough, we have 2 belts of it. But because it can be used as an alloy for other resources, it actually makes sense to have 2, just not right now. That it's kind of funny that we have all this cobalt, or potentially we'll have all this cobalt, but we're not really going to need it to make that much cobalt items. It's more of an alloy. It needs the molten cobalt steel, which comes from the steel and cobalt. Set that to input, and then we know at maximum we're just going to have 30 of these, which means we would need a 15 of our ingots, and something tells me the setup is going to be identical, and it certainly seems to be. Same input and same output balance there. So, now that we know what this is going into, what do the cobalt steel plates go into? Well, interestingly enough, very little. I was expecting it to go into a lot more than this. Of course, the cobalt steel bearings and gear wheels are important, and they go into all of the blue or express level of belts and inserters, so we certainly need a bunch of them for that. And the bearings are basically for the same thing. And then it's the thermal energy store, which is the science cost tweaker edition, which also requires tungsten, but that goes into this next tier, the gold science. So science cost tweaker, one thing it does help is when you have resources that technically don't have very many places to go, it gives you a dump of them. So we'll need a ton of cobalt when it comes to doing the research, but prior to that, we really only need it for the extent that we need belts and inserters. But we have another setup here that's gonna be the exact same size. So really the only limiting factor is how much can we mush the train station in there. And it could probably be mushed in quite a bit. So let's just pull the whole thing out. Luckily it's easier because there's not quite as much in there as there was in the other stations. But we can put this in here. We really just want it basically as close as we can get it. And the wires would reach if we did this. This feels downright claustrophobically close. So we'll go with that. Okay, make sure this one is still set. Invar plate load. Cobalt steel plate load. With these set to the correct alloys. And all of these signals should still be good. And it looks like we are out of the concrete now, because robots are doing their thing. They are staying quite busy. But we have another set of machines here. Don't want to smash them in too tight, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter that much, because I don't expect this to expand in scope because we just don't have the steel for it, and probably won't at this build. So we'll put that there. And stone is holding out, surprisingly, because we just don't need that much. That out of all of this, really, this is the only stone input, and it's not using slag anymore. So it is quite limited. And in part, that's because we are reusing existing concrete. So we're cutting our stone production down by quite a bit, and look at all those robots trying to park. Even with all those spots. But I think it's working. Okay, hopefully the robots have finished up with cobalt. Yeah, they're getting there. Well, in the meantime, we can place some belts down. So the only way to make this is with our cobalt. It might actually make a little bit more sense if we did the balancer like this, which will pull from both sides. Not that it really matters that much, but for completeness, we'll do it that way. And just extending these belts is probably going to trash the ore bus because of how slowly we make the cobalt. But what can you do? And the cobalt is the alloy that gets added into the steel, so we need much less of it than the regular steel. And then we have our steel use here. And this actually might be something where we might want to consider having a priority because of how precious the steel actually is. But even knowing that, I'm not sure how much of a value it would be. Because I imagine a lot of the things that are going to use cobalt are also going to use the Invar. So does it really help to say, no, don't run Invar, we want cobalt steel, when the same item we were going to build needed both anyway? So to avoid extra complication, I kind of just want to see if it works. But at least we know that this bus will be set up in such a way where we can prioritize these belts in that way. But having that kind of logic is less important up here because it's technically already being controlled by the status of these warehouses and the inputs of the ores here. So also attaching it to these warehouses would give a priority between, let's say, iron versus steel or versus copper or something like that, which is an extra level of granularity that I'm not sure we would actually benefit from. So I kind of want to avoid that for now. So we can switch this over to our cobalt steel. And I'm actually kind of happy that we're getting this done sooner rather than later, because it could have been at the very end of the bus, which would have taken forever, but because of the positioning of it, we're doing it now. It's probably better because it's going to take an extremely long time to fill up this train station. Let's see, we can actually come in through the side again. It's pretty tight. And it does involve, like, hopping over some signals just so we can see them. But hey, it fits in, it looks symmetrical, and that's better than not doing it. Well, one thing we haven't really been placing is lights. It's less important with the night vision, but probably should be remembering to do it. This version of night vision, although more color accurate, is a little darker, so it can be occasionally nice to have some extra light in there. But with that, we should be able to test our cobalt steel. And it should basically run at the same speed as the Invar. And it's going to slowly fill up that station. It looks like it's running fast now, but you have to look at the ore bus to get the other part of the story, where it's down to 2,000, and one of our two methods of running to produce it can't even run because we are overloaded on nickel. So even with our meager output of cobalt, it's actually only going to run at half of that speed until something else gets maxed out, but it's usually the nickel. So you see how fast this number is going down. But luckily it's being as efficient as it can be, which is the best we can hope for. So hopefully it gets caught up without too much fuss. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to finish up with the standard steel coils and all of the alloys that go into that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.